Welcome everybody to our class this morning. This is Body Recovery. One of our most popular programs with the Wellness Department is our Stretch and Release program. Some of these tools may look familiar to you. They're items that we use to help mobilize the soft tissue to improve your mobility, make you be able to move healthfully and without pain or discomfort. I'm going to take these, I'm going to set them aside, and I'm going to share with you some ways in which you can take these same tools and find tools at home to accomplish the same process. So we're going to work from our feet up, doing a little bit of mobilization using everyday items, and then we're going to follow up with that with some stretching techniques as a way to help our body recover. So one thing we don't get to do in the exercise studio is take our shoes and socks off, but today that's allowed. So if you have shoes on, if you have socks on, and if you'd like to remove both of them, that's going to help with this process. So as I mentioned, we're going to start from the feet up. So I'm going to grab a couple items over here. Items that you likely have around at home. We have a golf ball, we have a tennis ball, and we have a lacrosse ball. My lacrosse ball has a little smiley face on it. It's named Dolores. Any one of these is going to be helpful for you to help mobilize, starting through the feet. So one of the areas that we most often neglect is the bottom of the foot. I'm going to use the golf ball just because it is a little bit of a smaller item. The surface on the foot is not all that big. So working the golf ball around underneath the foot, looking for any sort of little tender spots. If you happen to find one, that's where you want to apply a little bit of extra pressure. Likely going to be right there in the middle or a little bit forward into the forefoot area. We spend a lot of time on our feet throughout the day, and we don't spend a lot of time actually engaging with the feet. So this is a multi-purpose way to loosen up any of that tissue that's accumulated over the year, and also just it feels good. So we'll spend a little bit of time right now. I'm working through my right foot. If you happen to start on the other, that's okay. We're going to be switching over to that here in a moment. So again, just working it around. You might find some tender spots, you might not, depending on the day. Things change pretty rapidly, especially through the bottoms of the feet. So we'll go ahead and do a swap or a roll. Golf ball over and under the left foot. Same deal. We're just rolling around, trying to find some tender locations. I've found one right there in the middle. So what I'm going to do, I mentioned before, is applying a little bit of extra pressure. All you need to do to accomplish that is to press down with the foot, or you can apply some soft pressure with the hands. Even just clawing the toes down towards the floor to apply some additional pressure will work. We don't want to spend much more than about 30 seconds or so applying pressure into any one location. Just soft and periodically is enough. Make sure you hit all the arch area as well. Over time, the aging individual, the arches begin to collapse some. So really getting in there with a golf ball or any other round, smooth object is helpful. Another item that you may have around the home that can help with this is a frozen water bottle. The addition of the cold with the firm will enhance the sensation of loosening up the bottom portion of the foot. So we're going to set that golf ball aside for now, and I'm going to grab a new item, something that we also probably have lying around the house. I have a dice here. A dice is or a die. This is something that could be supplemented in with a marble, again, any small object. We're not actually going to be stepping and moving around on this. Instead, we're going to work on toe function. So setting that dice down onto the ground, I just rolled a 5. We're going to work on trying to pick up that dice, that die, and really try to take your time here and focus on each individual toe. Maybe starting with the big toe, trying to claw that up off the ground, moving to the second toe, and down the line. Again, that mobilization, that fine motor control through the feet is something that's often lost over the process of time. So just really getting in there with a die or a marble, any small object can help maintain nerve connections from the brain all the way down to the toes. Individuals who have peripheral neuropathy, that loss of sensation through the bottom of the feet, are going to have some difficulty with this one just because that loss of sensation is going to make it much more difficult for them to create small, fine motions. But that's all the more reason to be attempting to do this. So we'll go ahead, we'll spend some time now on the other foot. Go ahead and switch. I'm just working on picking up toes, picking up dice with the toes, working it down the line. You can even treat this as a set of exercises. When you work on, say, something like a bicep curl or a chest press, we often recommend doing 2 sets of 10 repetitions. Well, how about we do 2 sets down the line, working big toe to little toe. Try to pick it up with each toe. I'm wrapping up my second set here. And toes should be pretty well loosened up, maybe even a little worn out after that. The other thing that should feel pretty good is the bottoms of the feet. So we're going to set the die over to the side with our golf ball, and we're going to grab our next tool. Again, I mentioned 3 to begin with: the golf ball, the tennis ball, and the hardened lacrosse ball. Think of a lacrosse ball as just a larger version of the golf ball, which is what we'll use for the next piece. So we're going to set the tennis ball and the golf ball aside. The tennis ball is great and more readily available. If you need a tennis ball for this process, we're happy to supply them through the wellness department. Otherwise, we're going to work in onto our ankles next. Now, for some people, this could be a little bit challenging just because we are going to work the leg crossed up over onto the other. If this is not for you, if you're not able to cross your leg, we can do some modifications where you are going to need to do a lean down and rolling on the ankle or propping it up on some sort of object. But we are going to go with the cross-legged technique as a start today. So let's focus on our right leg. Let's cross it over the left. It doesn't matter what position, doesn't matter if it's flat, just as long as that leg is propped up. And now we're going to focus in onto the ankle. Using our lacrosse ball, we're going to apply a little bit of pressure around the ankle joint. Now this is following suit with exactly what we did with the golf ball. We're working on finding any sort of soft spot or tender spot, not something that makes you say ow, but something that makes you say ooh, as in ooh, that feels pretty good. When we find something like that, we're actually going to apply that pressure down, just as we did with the golf ball. And now we can make it a little bit more intense by doing something called the floss technique. We have now tacked the fascia down, and now we are going to floss around by rotating through the ankle. That flossing of the fascia is going to help to release some of that built-up scar tissue around the ankle joint. And some of you may be wondering, well, why do I want to be doing this? Well, let me tell you. When we're walking around every day, the more mobility that we have in and around the ankle joint, the more we're able to adapt to different terrain and different environments. So if we're walking through the grass, if we have an immobile ankle, it's going to be much more difficult to adapt to that softened turf. But a mobile ankle is able to work around on it much, much easier. Now, most people are likely to experience that ooh spot either on the forefoot of the ankle or on the back near the Achilles tendon. So again, we're just applying some soft pressure, tacking down the fascia, and flossing around by moving the ankle. Some may begin to experience a little bit of fatigue up through the shin. That's because this rotation of the ankle is actually utilizing those muscles of the shin region as well. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a rest on the right leg, and I'll do the alternative method over on the left. So I'm going to do a hinge forward, making sure that I'm still nice and safe seated in my chair. And instead of being able to do that floss technique now, we're just working around through the ankle to try to find some softened spots, and we're just applying pressure in with the lacrosse ball. Again, this is something that can be a little bit fatiguing. We are generating pressure. We are forcing or creating some force into different areas around the ankle. We're not just holding the ball and we're not just rubbing the ball on areas, but we are doing more of a dig in, trying to create some sort of a release in each individual area. An additional way in which you can do this is by sitting down on the ground or even laying down on a couch, anywhere that allows for you to get to any joint or region of the body a little bit easier. So now that we're winding down on the left leg too, let's go ahead and sit upright for a moment. We can set the lacrosse ball, or if you're using a golf ball, over to the side, and those feet should feel pretty good. If we were to have done a pre to post test on mobilization or mobility of the feet, no doubt that you would be moving around a whole lot better now than you were about 10 minutes ago. So the feet get to take a little bit of a rest, and next we're going to transition up into the lower region of the leg. We're going to focus in onto the calves. And you're going to see a lot of the same technique being used. So one item that you may have something similar to is any sort of a rod type item that can be used to roll up and down the shins. If you don't have something like this around the home, this could be like a broomstick handle or a mop handle. You can still grab both sides, open palm it, and allow it to roll up and down the shin to release some of that tissue, that fascia. Otherwise, we can resort back to still using the lacrosse ball. Same concept, we're working on rolling it down the shin, looking for any sort of an ooh spot. If you find that ooh spot, apply some additional pressure, pull that ball in onto the area, holding for about 15, 20, 30 seconds, or until you get a little bit tired of holding the ball to the spot and then working to release. So I mentioned that tack and floss before, where we apply pressure to an area and then move around a different part of the body. If we apply pressure onto the shin, similar to how I'm doing now, and just work on raising and lowering the toes, you're going to feel that same sensation. So let's take a minute. I'm still over here on my left leg. If you're on the left leg, great. If you're on the right, we'll be joining you here shortly. Let's get in onto the calf next. So I'm just using an open palm, using the ball to roll through that body of the calf, all that big meaty portion of the lower part of the leg. This is a very endurance-trained part of the body. So with it being that way, we're more likely to develop some of those tissue adhesions. So this one, you might not need to apply very much pressure. It might be more of a roll of the ball across the belly of the muscle before you experience some that ooh sensation. So let's wind down on that leg, and now we're going to switch over to the opposite. And again, we'll show the alternative method using the leg cross. Let's work on the shin first. Again, rolling the ball. If you find a spot, stop for a minute, apply the pressure, and again, now that we have the tissue tacked down, we can rotate the ankle to floss through. What's happening is just like you floss your teeth. You're rolling it through a small area. By flexing and extending the foot with the tissue tacked down, it's creating a back and forth motion of the tissue, pulling through that tacked spot, and that's what's creating the loosening of any sort of tissue adhesions that may have built up over time. So let's continue to work around, see if we find anything else on that front side of the shin. And it shouldn't be a game of hide and seek. When you find those softened spots or those tender spots, your body's going to let you know very quickly. We'll wrap up with the front side, and we'll make our shift over back to the calf muscle, the big portion of the lower leg. And again, with an open palm, we're just rolling around, trying to find any tender spots. And under the circumstances that you're not finding any tender spots right now, we can work it further on down, backtracking to some areas that we've already covered. Maybe you found a really soft spot that didn't get enough love around the Achilles. Take an opportunity now to work back through it. A second pass is actually recommended. One time over is great, but if we can do 2 passes, even better. Excellent, excellent. So as we wind down with the lower leg, we have our big movers coming up to be focusing in on too. We have the quadriceps, the top side of the thigh, we have the hamstrings, the underside of the thigh, and then we have the glutes, that big portion of the body, our main mover that we're all sitting on right now. So for convenience purposes, we're going to start in on the top, and then we'll move through hamstrings and then finish with the glute. Starting with the right leg, we have options. If you have that rolling device, a rolling pin is actually identical to what I'm using now, just an everyday item. If you're using a broom handle or a mop handle, that works well too. This rolling pattern can help to cover a lot of area at once to loosen up the quadricep. And the purpose of the rolling is different than what we use the ball for. We're not going to be able to create the same release that tacking with a lacrosse ball, a golf ball, or a tennis ball does, but we can still get some good help through the rolling motion. So we'll just do one easy pass using the roller. And again, if you don't have a roller, you can already be using your golf ball, tennis ball, lacrosse ball, anything round. So let's wind down with leg number 1, and I'm going to switch out to demonstrate alternative methods. I'm going to use the tennis ball this time. And we're going to do that same thing that we did on the calves. We're now able to use both hands, cupping it in between, working the hand fine motor skill to roll the tennis ball around, work in through the thigh. You might find a spot that feels good. If you do, and now this one's even more advanced, you can be your own masseuse. We know masseuses, and they use their elbows. Well, we have 2 elbows too. So you can always dig in, use your elbow. If you find a real tender spot, hold there for a while. What does this look like if we're applying pressure? That same tack and floss technique that we used on the lower leg. Real advanced version would be to raise the leg up. We can now extend in and out. We have the quadricep tacked down. We're flossing through, working to alleviate any sort of muscle adhesions that we find. So we're going to continue to cover that whole top side of the left leg. One area that's you'll find is very, very tender is up into the hip crease. Rolling through the hip crease, we have a lot of different muscle attachments. A lot of muscles originate up through the hip crease. So it's not uncommon that that's where you find the majority of those tender spots right now. Good. Now, top sides of the thighs are covered. We're going to hit the underside of the thighs. Now, this one's a little bit more relaxive in nature. So we're going to take that lacrosse ball. It's a little bit larger, more surface area than the golf ball, and we'll slide back in our chair. The more firm your chair is, the easier this will be. We're just going to place that ball underneath the thigh. Ideally, with it propped underneath, we're able to freely move that leg, as I am. And now from here, I'm doing that same tack and floss that we've done with the lower portion of the body and the quadricep. And we're just working to loosen up the hamstrings. Periodically, let's go ahead and just change the location of the ball, rolling it a little bit deeper under the thigh. And continuing that same flexion and extension of the leg. And over time, if you do this enough, this is not only going to be a body recovery move, but this is going to be a little bit of a workout for the quadricep with all this movement. We'll give one more switch on the same leg. I'm going to move mine a little further down this time. And what's great about this is that there's no wrong place to place the ball. Anywhere you go with it, under the thigh, and follow this pattern, you're going to receive some benefit. Okay, so we'll do our switch now. Switching the ball underneath the right leg. And work that same flexion extension. Now the hamstrings are the muscle that's most prone to tightening, contracting over the course of time. As most people, as they do get older, they spend more time sitting. As we sit, the hamstring muscles begin to contract and shorten. That's why it begins to get more challenging to do things like tie your shoes, to pull your socks up, to pull your pants up. All these little tips and tricks to keep them a little bit more mobile go a long way. I just moved my lacrosse ball to a second spot underneath the second leg. And my leg's getting a little bit tired, so I'm actually just going to allow it to sit and apply some pressure down. Just a little soft movement is okay. And this is a great area to use that frozen water bottle on as well. If you happen to have one in the freezer, or preemptively put one in the freezer for the next time you participate in body recovery, I would recommend that for the underside of the thigh as well. It's a cold object. It's a firm object, it's easy to work with, and it helps just as a lacrosse ball does. Let's move to one final area underneath that leg. Hello, we found a spot, we're twitching. See, adhesions have no bearing on time. They'll attack the young and the old, whether you're active or inactive. So we need to do what we can to stay ahead of all those little nuisances. So as we wrap up the left leg, hamstring, let's take that ball back out. And now we're going to wind up or wrap up today with a little stretching. Now that we've mobilized, this is the key. This is the best time to stretch. Our body is loose, it's warm, and it's ready. So many of you are familiar with a yoga strap. If you've done yoga, if you haven't, this is a yoga strap. Not something everybody has in their home. So we're going to toss that away. We don't need it. What most people do have, one of these, is a belt. Same thing as a yoga strap for our purposes. So we're going to work on scooting our way back up towards the edge of the chair. We're going to take one hand on each end of the belt. The longer the belt, the easier this will be. This one's actually a little bit short, but we'll make it work. We're going to hook that belt underneath the foot of the right leg. We're going to work to extend the leg out. From here, we're going to work on inching our way down while keeping the leg straight. And shortly and very quickly, you should feel the hamstring begin to engage and stretch. You can continue to work it forward, forward, forward. When you find that end range of motion, we're just going to sit. Couple points to be made. Work on keeping your head elevated up over your heart. Try not to allow your back to round all too much. And work on keeping that knee, that leg, nice and straight. So still on that first leg, let's back it off for a moment. And now let's take it back forward. Little bit at a time. Don't worry about the destination. Focus more on the experience. We want to experience just a light stretch. A great guideline is if you feel your heart rate accelerating, you are pushing too far. That means no more. Back off if you're breathing heavy. Let's back it down. Relax that first leg. Plant that foot flat. Hook under the opposite. Work on extending the leg out. And for some, that might be enough stretch. That's okay. Each one of us is different. Don't worry about what your neighbor is doing. Just worry that you're experiencing that same pull through the hamstring region, maybe even a little bit into the calf, if you're flexing your foot or pulling the toes towards the body. Let's work our way down, finding that end range of motion, still being cognizant of keeping the head elevated over the heart and the back nice and flat. Holding, breathing, enjoying. I can think of no better way to start the day. Let's release it back, relax, and let's engage it again. Reworking back forward. Find yourself at that end range of motion. We'll spend another 15 to 20 seconds here. Then I'll give you permission to relax for real. And slide your way back up. Let's pull that second foot flat into the floor. And we'll actually set the belt over to the side. And now we're going to work in onto the top side of the leg. We're working on the quadricep. So I recommend doing one of these at a time. Two of these can be a little bit too much. But what we'll do is we have our hands on the arms of the chair. Hopefully your chair at home has arms. Otherwise, down by the sides will still work. We're going to try to work on hooking that right foot under, like so. Some of us may not be able to do that without assistance, in which case we can assist with the legs. From there, carefully reclining back. You're going to begin to feel a pull very quickly through the top side of the thigh. No tricks, no hiding during this one. It's going to light up there about immediately. We'll spend another 15 to 20 seconds here, and then we'll make our swap over onto the other leg. To come out of the stretch, first work your torso forward, and then depending on if you need assistance or not, you can use your hands or simply unslide the foot. Let's switch over onto the other, carefully assisting toes down, and work the recline back. Now I mentioned everyone's going to be a little bit different here. You might find that your spouse is able to recline all the way back because they're very loose through the hip and the quadricep. Some people may be very forward and find that this is enough to get them a stretch. A reminder that that's okay. All we're doing is seeking the stretch. And release forward. Excellent. We'll wrap up with a couple more for the hips. We're going to go back into that crossed leg position. So if you can, we're going to work on crossing the leg over the top. This is going to work to stretch out the piriformis. We have a number of people moving around who experience some sciatic nerve pain. This is a great stretch to help to alleviate that. Again, that crossed figure 4 position may be enough if you want to make the stretch a little bit more intense. Some gentle body weight forward. Oh yeah. And release. Now you might be saying, I can't cross my leg over. That's okay. We can do just an open-legged butterfly style position where we're trying to touch the soles of the feet together. We're still working on stretching through that inner thigh a little bit up into the hips, and a gentle pressing down separation at the knees will deepen the stretch here as well. Notice we're still attempting to keep that nice upright posture, chest elevated, breathing nice and natural. And release. So returning the feet back flat to the floor. To recap, what we just experienced was body recovery, focusing this morning on the lower extremities. From the hips down, all the way to the toes, you should feel mobilized, stretched, and ready to attack the day. We'll be working through next week on how to tackle the upper body. Or next time around, we'll focus on the upper body so we can apply all of those same techniques to the arms, to the torso, to the back, and to the neck. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.